All right, we should be live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to each and every one of you. I was originally not planning on streaming today because I had quite a bit of work to do. Excuse me, let me just close a bunch of the programs that are currently taking up a lot of resources here. I had quite a bit of work to do, but there's some stuff that's happening. Adon, how you doing, sir? That I really wanted to share with all of you. Some conversations that's happening in South Africa that I think we do have to talk about because, well, the situation is, I think, more dire than most people realize, and it's designed in such a way that most of us won't even recognize that it's happening. Most of us won't even recognize that uh, we're under attack. Although I do think that is changing. I do think as time has gone on, and especially as things, Gert, how you doing, sir? Guten Tag. As time has gone on, I think a lot of South Africans have started to wake up to the reality of how things are happening in South Africa. Chris de Beer, how you doing, sir? And this is why I'm going live today, even though I genuinely do have a lot of work to do. It just came across my desk, and uh, the big thing is there's some conversations that I can have in video form because they work. It's basically just a bunch of facts, and there's a little bit of opinion. And then there's things like this, which are larger conversations that need more time. And I think live streams just work better for those. Peter Pan, how you doing, sir? I hope you all are doing very, very well. I'm literally this is the most impromptu stream that I've done, I think, ever. Because normally I will have something planned. I have a lot of things planned for tomorrow for that stream, but here we are, right? Let me just go to this stage so long because this is where we're going to spend quite a bit of our time on X, and then also I have a YouTube video that I want to show you guys. So we're going to be reacting a little bit, a throwback to my gaming days on Twitch. We're going to be reacting to a video. It's not a long video, it's maybe like 12, 13 minutes, but there's so much in that video that applies perfectly to what is happening in South Africa. So we're going to be doing a bit of a reaction here in a minute. How's it from the Eastern Cape? Charlie, how you doing, sir? Jim, how you doing? Dirk, how you doing, sir? I hope all of you are doing very, very well. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for asking. Uh, it's a cold day at the moment here in Cape Town, like very cold, I would say, but otherwise it's all good. So let me start with this. So, this is a new group that has come about. It's called Afrikaners vir Suid-Afrika. Now, Afrikaners vir Suid-Afrika goes around basically attacking everyone who points out the issues in South Africa, right? So, AfriForum, Solidarity, basically any group that meets with the American ambassador, meets with the Americans. It doesn't matter what it is. If you're a group and you're telling the truth about the stuff that's happening in South Africa, these guys are against you. They're one of the groups that have called it treason. And here they are meeting with the ambassador of America, Brent Bosel III. So, in other words, this is a social or civic organization in South Africa meeting with the ambassador, but they were the ones who told us that it is treason, that civil organizations do not have the right to negotiate with foreign nations, and that if a civil organization were to negotiate with a foreign nation, that is treason. But apparently, and as I think most of us at this point know, it's only treason when you're telling the truth. It's not treason when you're glazing the ANC. It's not treason when you're telling the rest of the world that there is absolutely nothing wrong in South Africa. And if there is, by some magical fairy dust, still people who believe that there is nothing wrong in South Africa, let's just do a very quick logical test. Every single person agrees that if you exclude people or include people based purely on the color of their skin, if that is the only metric that you use to judge the worth of a person, that is racism. Every single person agrees with this. If you had a country where the country's laws makes it so that you can only hire about 10% of your workforce to be black, the entire world would immediately call it racist for good reason, because that would be a racist law. Except here in South Africa, they call it redress laws and transformational laws, and somehow that's okay. Somehow there's no reason for us to even debate it. When you have a country where a certain demographic of your people are not allowed to go to university purely based on the color of their skin, every human being on earth would acknowledge, well, that's pretty racist. You should probably not be doing it, except here in South Africa, where it's called redress and transformation, and somehow it's perfectly normal, perfectly fine. No one needs to argue. Robot, how you doing? Robbie, how you doing? Knight of Justice, how you doing? So these are simple logical tests that you can apply to merely ask yourself if there might be something wrong in South Africa. When you look around you and you see the destruction that this ANC has wrought, when you look, for example, my video that's coming out at 2 o'clock, it's just going to be after the stream, where I highlight what is a new phenomena that no one knows about. Literally, no one is talking about it. I see no videos on it, but it's called soft expropriation, because the government has found a new way to expropriate property from farmers without technically taking the farm. You can watch that video for more information. When you see a war that is being waged on one group of people in the country with one skin color, at some point you have to be able to acknowledge that there is a little bit wrong here. You know, even if you like it, even if this is what you enjoy, you should be able to acknowledge at least that, hey, there's a lot of racism in this country. I don't mind it, by the way. Be as racist as you guys want. When I see the white Afrikaner suffering, I get a gleeful hope in my stomach. But at least be honest about the fact that you are racist and that what you're doing is racist. So let's scroll down here. I want to show you guys a different. We're going to be talking about this as well in a second, but I want to show you guys. Now, ordinarily, I don't have much time for Peniel. In general, I find Peniel to be a very dangerous podcaster. And I don't want to. I don't really want to discuss people. I would prefer to discuss ideas. But every once in a while, it is important to discuss people because people might be peddling very dangerous ideas. Peniel, why I view him as a very dangerous podcaster. Peniel has, in my entire time of watching his content, displayed an incredible lack of knowledge on just about every political front. There is almost nothing political that I have ever heard Peniel discuss where I can say, okay, this man has he has some insight into this. Like he knows at least to some extent what he is talking about. Every single thing that Peniel knows is either something that he heard someone else say, and now he's just repeating it on, sort of en masse, or at infinitum, or it's just some really what's the word I'm looking for? Um, like a lukewarm take that sounds nice, but when you actually dig into it, you realize, okay, there's literally nothing here. There's nothing here. Okay, so Peniel tweets out, and this is, by the way, for those of you not aware, this is in response to the Bokkiesweek things that happened, right? So you have Bokkiesweek. Bokkiesweek is a cultural celebration by Afrikaners surrounded by sport. Now, I realize there might be people here who don't quite understand Afrikaner culture. There's a song that might explain it a bit better. The song is, I can't remember the exact tune of the song, but it's Afrikaners is plesierig. Dis Afrikaners is plesierig, dit kan julle glo. Hulle hou van partytjies en dan maak hulle so. This song, I think, to a great extent, captures the culture of Afrikaners. Afrikaners are really joyful, jolly people. They like coming together, they like speaking their language, and they love sport, right? They love coming together, having a braai, and celebrating sport. And that's where Bokkiesweek was born. Bokkiesweek came out of this celebration, and really, it starts about 3 years before the end of apartheid. And the reason it has to start there is already during apartheid, the National Party had started opening up the sports of this country to all races. There's already, by the way, apartheid started ending in South Africa in like the 1970s already, not officially, but unofficially from like the 1970s, you start seeing legislation come in through South Africa that relaxes race laws, that removes certain race restrictions, where people can now participate in sport regardless of the color of their skin. And you start to see a lot of organizations and schools in South Africa excluding white children in the name of being a bit more diverse. And so Bokkiesweek comes around as a way to give those kids that are excluded from participating in any of the national teams that exist a way to participate and to compete against one another. And it's an excuse for Afrikaners to come together and actually enjoy themselves, right? To actually enjoy the culture and to celebrate the things that make us Afrikaners. And just Turksvay, by the way, the song itself is not a Karen Zoid song. I think Karen Zoid did include the song, but it's like an old nursery rhyme. The nursery rhyme goes, Afrikaners is plesierig, dit kan julle glo. Hulle hou van partytjies en dan maak hulle so. Eers draai die ou vroutjie en dan draai haar ou man en dan vat maar lyfie en dan draai hulle saam. Something to that effect, right? I can't remember exactly, but I grew up with this, and this was long before Karen Zoid became a thing. But yeah, I grew up with that song. Like this was one of the songs that we would sing at every single family gathering. My uncles would know it better because they know songs that I've never even heard of that they would sing at these get-togethers. But to zero in on Penuel and the question. So Penuel asks a genuine question to white South Africans. Why do you hate black people so much? Okay, so let's quickly start. This is not a genuine question. This is what is known as the presupposition fallacy, or just more colloquially, a loaded question. You see, the reason it is the presupposition fallacy or a loaded question is the presupposition is baked into the question. In other words, the question already accepts that white people are racist. That's not up for debate. So there is no debate whether or not white people are racist. It's that white people are already racist. White people now merely need to tell Penuel why they are so racist. This is a tool very often used by the left specifically, but the right does it too. It's not exclusively to the left, and more often than not, it is used by people that don't quite understand the nuance of the stuff that they're about to discuss or the things that they are discussing, and so they ask these questions as a gotcha, right? Now, if you engage with the question in any way, shape, or form, you are already racist because you've engaged with the question. And the question isn't asking, are white people racist? The question already assumes white people are racist. Now, white people just need to explain why they're racist, right? So let's quickly examine this, Penuel. Let's ignore the fact that you have a very loaded question there and that you have committed a fallacy as a result of asking the question. Let's explore it. So we live in a country with a black government, a majority black government. For the last 32 years, black people have every 4 years made an X next to the party, the ANC, who have governed this country. They have, in the last 32 years, destroyed this country on every level. There is not a single thing in this country that you can point to anywhere where the ANC has actually made progress. People might say, oh, but more people are connected to the electricity grid. Yes, that's only when and if they can get their hands on actual electricity. This electricity grid is also not built on the system of pay what you use. Instead, it is built on a parasitical system where those who can pay are subsidizing those who cannot. This, by definition, relies on the host being capable of actually paying for the electricity that those who cannot pay is paying. The water. People might argue, well, more people have access to water. Once again, we run into the problem. The ANC did not build more power stations. They did not build more dams. They did not build more water infrastructure. They merely took what was already built by the apartheid government and then started distributing that more widely. What the apartheid government had built, however, was never built to supply that many people with water and electricity. This means that the ANC has not progressed the system. They have merely taken the system that had already existed and divided it even further. This still runs into the problem that the system of water is reliant upon a host to be paying for the resources used, whereas others are merely using the resources, yet funding none of the usage. Let's look at the economy. The economy of South Africa has not grown. Instead, it has backslid significantly. The average person today is poorer than what they were in 1994. Unemployment in 1994 is about 24 to 26%, dependent on whose statistics you rely on. Today, that number sits firmly past 30% and closer to 40% for young black people. That unemployment rate sits over 60%. So not only are fewer black people employed than what they were in 1994 or even prior to it, but more black people today, more young black people are unemployed than in the history of this nation, FYI. Like even during the height of apartheid, young black people weren't quite this unemployed. Let's look at the wealth gap. That's right. The wealth gap in South Africa has grown since 1994. It has not shrunk for a party that so desperately believes in the concept of equality. The ANC apparently knows not how to achieve that because, and this is a big one, poor black people are now far poorer than even their black middle class compatriots. That's the history of the ANC. Education. It used to be the case that if you got into a school in the Bantu areas in South Africa, you got a pretty decent education. This is why a lot of the members of the ANC went to go study law and became doctors and actually went to go study abroad in countries like the UK and in America. They did that because the education level at those schools were high enough for them to get acceptance at those universities. Today, the vast majority of young people going through the school system in South Africa are unemployable because the education system has been completely eroded. The government loves to say we had the highest number of matriculants actually pass last year. The issue, in order to get that number, they had to completely collapse the requirements, that is, pass rates, in order to get that. So, yes, more people have passed, but you've made it almost impossible to fail, which, I guess, mission accomplished. On every one of these levels, and on so many more, this country has been entirely eradicated. It has been destroyed. And now we get to the big one. The entirety of South Africa is built on an unsustainable system. It is built as a parasitical system where the government and the body attached to the government, that would be about 28 million South Africans that do not work and instead rely on government handouts, are suckling upon the host. This would be the black and the white and the colored and the Indian middle classes of this country, who are dying to try and keep up with the taxes, who are dying to try and keep up with the rates, who are dying to keep up with utility bills in this country. These are the people, which is a very small minority, by the way, less than 4.5 million people in this country pay the vast majority of the taxes in South Africa. And this host is the only thing keeping the system alive. All of your electricity, all of your water, all of your education relies upon this tiny minority of the host to pay for it. And if the minority eventually runs out of power, guess what? The entire system comes crumbling down. So, to answer Penuel's question, let's first discuss the racism of this country. Is the racism on the side of white people? Well, let's look at Bokkiesweek. Bokkiesweek had nothing to do with racism. Bokkiesweek was no different to Zulus celebrating their culture with coming together in traditional garb and dancing and doing war cries and the like. This is part of Zulu culture, and no one gets angry when the Zulus enjoy this part of their culture. When we look at Bafana Bafana, have you guys noticed how not diverse Bafana Bafana actually is? Have you guys noticed that? The Springboks have a black captain. A good chunk of the Springboks are colored and black. And yet, the second the media or anyone in this country looks at the picture of the Springboks and see one too many white face, there is outcry in this country about the whites and how the whites are taking over rugby and how rugby is just too white. And then you go to the stadiums and you look at the footage of the stadiums. What is it that you notice in those stadiums? It's true. You do notice coloreds and you do notice whites and blacks and you do notice Indians. But the vast majority of the people that's watching those games are not black. They're not colored. They're not Indian. They're white. It is the sport that we most support. And yet, it is the sport that creates the biggest nightmare and headache in this country for the racists in government who want nothing more than to destroy it. You just had the Minister of Trade and Industry, Minister Parks Tau. He's trying to make the All Blacks event a protected event, which would effectively mean that no one can sell anything unless they're BE certified to that event. Right. So the government is now overly politicizing even our sports. But Penuel has the gall to ask, why do white people hate black people so much? This is a genuine question to black people who share Penuel's belief. Please show me where white people hate black people. Show me this hatred. Us celebrating our culture and allowing our children to participate in a week of sports in their own language among their own people isn't hatred of everyone else. It's merely the celebration of what is ours. And this is the big thing. And this is why I want to show you that video in a minute, because it so perfectly highlights the problems that we seem to be facing in this world, where if any other culture celebrates their culture, it's seen as beautiful and so organic and so beautiful. Oh my word, just look at this. Take, for example, the movie Black Panther. When Black Panther comes out, it comes out to critical acclaim across the world. White liberals, black liberals are celebrating Wakanda. In fact, there were actual people Googling Wakanda, Africa to find out if they could fly to Wakanda here in Africa because they thought it was an actual genuine place that they could go to. But it was celebrated. Look at this African city with only black people living there. This is so beautiful. None of us, at least I was in the culture war at the time, not a single white person looked at this and went, wait, where are the whites? Why are you guys so racist against white people? No, this is Black Panther. It's set in Africa. This is clearly an African city. Kind of makes sense that there would only be Africans there. No one was asking, well, you guys need to race swap some of the people to get more diverse. Everyone was sort of happy. It fitted the plot. It made sense. Although today, if you were to make a movie with only white actors in it, even if you were to set that movie in the 1700s or the 1600s of the UK or Europe, you would have outrage. It would be called racist. It would be called hateful. Why is that? Why is it always hateful when white people celebrate their culture, but never the other way around? Like the other way around, it doesn't bother anyone, and including white people who aren't really bothered about it whatsoever. So Peñol, to me, I just wanted to highlight Peñol's. I don't even want to call it racism because at this point, I'm not sure if Peñol is doing this knowingly, if he's doing this only to get clicks. I genuinely don't know because if you go through Peñol's X post or his page, it's just asinine take after asinine take after asinine take. And I worry if he believes even like 30% of the stuff that he posts, we're in trouble. We're in serious trouble. I don't like the term African, as all people born here are African. African refers to location, not race. Zava Freedom, in my personal opinion, I'm not necessarily a fan of it either, right? I'm not a fan. Actually, I'll say this because I've been having this debate on X for a bit now. Um, my brother and I was having this conversation yesterday because we met a guy on the beach, and huge shout out to you. Uh, Conservative guy, super cool guy, really nice guy. I won't say his name because I don't want to dox anyone. Perhaps they don't want to be known. Perhaps they don't want people to know. But I met the guy on the beach, and he came up to me and he's like, "Hey, you're the YouTuber, Stefan Zeran." I'm like, "Yes, yes, hi." So we ended up talking, and he served in the armed forces in the apartheid government. He fought in Angola. He fought in Namibia. He was part of it, right? And then after 1994, he left because he was, I believe, he's an engineer or he's doing something to that effect, and he got work at a Taiwanese company. So he moved to Taiwan. He subsequently met his wife there, and they have two beautiful children. I think it's two, although I know of the two because he spoke to me about his son and daughter. Um, and he's happily married, beautiful children. I met his son on the beach yesterday. He's telling us about the work that he did and how the country has changed, because he's away quite a lot from the country. When he comes back, he sees the changes that's happening. And as we're driving away, my brother remarks on the fact that it's interesting to note how wrong people are about Afrikaners. Because here you have an Afrikaner that's clearly a conservative, not racist at all. In fact, married a Taiwanese woman. If he was racist, anyone who knows racists would know that doesn't happen, right? And then we got to talking about what it means to be conservative. Because in South Africa, the label conservatism is almost synonymous with racist. If you're a conservative, you might as well be a racist. That's a foregone conclusion. But of course, that's not what conservatism is. Conservatism merely means to conserve that which makes sense, to move slowly in terms of change, because cultures are very difficult to grow, very difficult to maintain, and super easy to break. You don't need much to break a culture. And then we got to a point where I say to my brother, I do believe that there is a slow and steady movement in South Africa away from pure racial classification of culture. Let me explain. If you view Afrikanerdom, right, or Afrikanerness as a white thing. So in your mind, to be an Afrikaner, you must be white and you must speak Afrikaans. That's the requirement. You start running into some serious issues because now you have to contend with someone like Carl Niehaus. You have to contend with someone like Max de Pre, someone like Adrian Basson, someone like Peter Kriel. They're white. They speak Afrikaans. Would you claim them as an Afrikaner? Would you say that that is a person with whom you want to build a future? I would argue no. At least from my perspective, my answer is no. I do not claim those people. They do not speak for me. They do not represent me. Therefore, they can't be Afrikaner. And so I believe that the term Afrikaner, the idea of being an Afrikaner, I think is slowly changing in this country away from the robust and oftentimes very restrictive racial designation towards more of a mindset designation, if that makes sense. Um, so, from my perspective, if you are a Christian, if you are conservative, and if you believe in the capitalist freedom of individuals, I want to go so far as saying you have the heart of an Afrikaner. You might not officially be an Afrikaner. Maybe you don't even see yourself as that. But to my mind, you do have the heart of an Afrikaner because that is what being an Afrikaner is being Christian, being God-fearing, believing in freedom and liberty, and believing in conservative values. That's the essence of what it means to be an Afrikaner. And I think that is happening in South Africa. I think we are moving past it, Zafa. So to answer your question, I do think as the ANC continues to destroy, we're going to see a rewriting of a lot of the labels. I think there's going to be a lot of historical African people who are going to start looking at Africanism and rejecting it, saying, but hold on, I don't feel African. I feel conservative. I feel Christian. I believe in the moral framework of Christianity and I believe in liberty. What does that make me? Right? Because that's not African. That's something completely different, at least broadly defined as these people would want to define it. Is exactly what the man has no idea of what culture is. Saint, you're definitely not wrong. Well, I see myself as a human and want to be treated as such. That's all I want. So, Bandit, the thing is, you are human, but you are also in a subcategory of human, right? Um, Historically, we've defined this as a tribe. And so the historical way of doing it was tribal. If you looked like me, if you spoke like me, you were like me, right? And this was important. Turks Fay, thank you so much for the 5 community subs, dude. Really appreciate you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This was important because being away from your tribe or outside of your tribe meant death. So it was incredibly important that if you're part of your tribe, you're safe, right? And we needed easy ways to identify different tribes. So looks and race and culture, these were easy ways of identifying our tribe. I do believe that in the era that we are going in, simply telling yourself or simply calling yourself human, uh, is sort of a precursor to what the globalists ultimately want, and it is this belief that all humans are equal and all humans are the same, which isn't true. All humans are not equal and all humans are not the same. If you're a human, but you believe in communism and you believe in statism and you despise liberty and freedom, from my perspective, your value to society is highly questionable. I wouldn't go so far as saying we should get rid of you. That's not my judgment to make. But I do question the idea that you could add anything of value to society whatsoever. You're still human. And in that regard, you still have certain liberties that is allowed you. But I highly doubt, right, that I would put you on equal value to someone who believes in good conservative values and believes in liberty and freedom. I would value that person far higher than the one who values communism or believes that Lenin may have may have had a point, if that makes sense. No one is equal, otherwise competition is meaningless. Yeah, but that's a different kind of equality. But I do get your meaning, Safa. I do get your meaning. A suggestion: get everyone that is controversial and have a debate with them, like Adrian Besson and Gaten McKenzie, to ask why it's so bad to have a culture day like Bokkiesweek and why it's bad. Knoxbox, I'd love to have debates, right? My biggest reason why I, generally speaking, don't do it is so. Firstly, I will not have a debate with someone when that debate isn't done in person, right? So I want to be in person with the other person in order to have that debate. The other problem is that as soon as you put an audience, it's no longer a debate. It's a battle of talking points where both sides are only speaking to their own fans. I just have to say and do things to own you, and then I win. I hate that. I absolutely despise that. I used to when I was a bit younger, I used to love watching these debates of Jordan Peterson destroys leftist or whatever. And those would be super fun until you realize this isn't a debate. The point of a debate, the word itself comes from the Greek, which means to reason together, right? The idea of a debate is to discover truth. That's the point of it, is to discover truth. Um, that's long gone. Nowadays, you watch these debates and it's literally just a bunch of talking points. I just need to make sure that I put all my talking points out there for everyone else to hear, and my fans think I owned you, and then we're good to go, right? I won. So this would be the only thing that I would probably just not do it on. Instead, I would be far more interested in doing exposés on them, exposing their evil and wickedness. So doing investigative journalism, finding the actual skeletons in their closets, things of that nature, I think is a far more value. Um, the heart of the Afrikaner, you nailed it. Blue Luri, how you doing? You literally chose a tongue twister for your name. I appreciate that. Anita, how you doing? I would have loved to pick perks before I was born, like video games. I don't think you're alone in that. I think a lot of people would have preferred to be able to pick perks, but that's just not the case. That's not how it works. I want to show you guys a video. This is the whole reason for why we're going live today. This is the whole reason. The Peniel thing was just something that popped in that I sort of wanted to share. But I really wanted to show you guys this because while I was watching this, it gave such a clear explanation. Wait, did I do it correctly? Because the last time I tried to do this, it did not work the way that I had hoped. Let's quickly see here. Share screen. This with audio, please. Yes. Okay. Hopefully you guys get audio now, right? Okay, so I'm hoping that you guys will get audio. But this video at the top, we're going to be reacting to it. There's a couple of things that I want to say about this video. that I'll highlight as we go through it. But just to listen to the stuff that's happening in South Africa and to know, I think, and this is the big one, to know that it's not localized to us. I think this is the thing that most people don't get. Every country throughout the world is fighting their own battle against the same enemy because the enemy is leftism. The enemy is an enemy that wants to see greater cooperation between different nations for one purpose and one purpose only, to squash any dissent, to ensure that anyone who tries to speak out can be crushed because they hold to very, very dangerous and very faulty ideas. So we're going to listen to Michael Shallenberger, whom I've read a lot of his stuff, and I love the work that he does. But yeah, listen to this.
Thank you, Philippa.
Could you guys hear that intro before we get into the listening, and you guys stop hearing the intro? Could you hear the intro? All right, so you can hear it. Okay, good.
And all of ARC for organizing this vital conversation. I have flown here from California to talk about saving Western civilization, which I am aware is a little like taking fire safety advice from a man whose house keeps burning down.
True.
My observations today are based on research that my co-author Alex Gutentag and I have conducted over the last 3 years. Our remarkable civilization rests on several pillars, including law and order, national borders, meritocracy, equal justice, the protection of children, industrialization, free speech, and a widespread faith in civilization's capacity to deliver a positive future. I'm not here.
The reality is, though, everything that he just mentioned there is incapable of being achieved by a nation who rejects the concept of God. And I think I'll explain it a little bit better like this. I think it was Franklin. No, it wasn't Franklin Roosevelt. Oh, I can't remember now. It's one of the founding fathers. It's not Jefferson. It's not Adams. Adams said that their constitution is wholly irrelevant to, is only applicable to a moral and God-fearing nation. But there was another founding father. I literally just can't remember his name now, but he effectively made the exact same point. A godless people cannot be governed by laws and justice, and there's a reason for it. Laws and justice only really has an effect on a people that is already self-regulating, right? So if you're a Christian, you self-regulate all the time because you know that you are fallen, corrupt, and evil, which means that you are highly questioning or highly suspect of your own desires, needs, and wants. Right? That's the moral imperative for a Christian, is to constantly look upon themselves and say, there are things that I do wrong that I have to regulate. I have to discipline myself, and I have to turn to God and ask forgiveness, and thereby govern myself to some extent. Because the problem with a law-abiding society, so a society that has laws and rules and a constitution, is that there's people who need to enforce the laws and the rules and the constitution. And if the people who are enforcing the laws, the rules, and the constitution have nothing that self-governs, so they're not Christian, they don't believe in a higher order or a higher power that judges them, they will corrupt the very system that they are meant to govern. And that was the real issue for the founding fathers of America. That is why the founding fathers of America made it very clear if you are not a religious and God-fearing nation, this constitution is wholly useless to you. And that is why America currently is in the midst of a constitutional crisis, because you have this really almost half of the population that doesn't want these rules that is imposed upon them. They don't want to be told what they can and cannot do. They want to be able to determine for themselves what they should and should not be allowed to do. And the problem there is that there is no foundation upon which these wants and needs are built. So they just always move. You'll see in a second the incredible evil people that is behind a lot of these works, but this is just sort of the same problem that exists here in South Africa exists around the world. David Lade, how are you doing?
Here to predict that these pillars will fall, but I am here to report that the demolition crew has been hired, paid in full, and asked to submit a diversity statement.
True.
Let's take a closer look at each of these pillars.
As long as they submit the diversity statement, if someone is going to destroy Western civilization and the values that we stand for, I would like to know that they are diverse. I would hate for it to just be a bunch of middle class white women with too much time on their hands. That would not be fun.
Depolicing, decriminalization, and the enabling of illegal camping, shoplifting, open-air drug dealing, and drug use undermine public safety. In San Francisco, authorities amputated the rotted feet of a mentally ill homeless woman and then put her right back on the street in the name of compassion. Mass migration hurts working-class citizens, increases crime, and creates victims. President Biden's open borders policy resulted in child trafficking and death, including of minors falling from rooftops while working. DEI policies and other forms of racial and sexual discrimination subvert meritocracy and undermine public safety. British police handcuffed and let 18-year-old Henry...
I do want to just highlight, I wanted to have him just finish that thought before I jumped in. I want to highlight the topic about the homeless woman who had her feet amputated and then immediately released upon the street. This is the difference between justice and empathy. You see, and this is why a conservative view of justice and mercy is so incredibly important, because you have at its core two things that are essential to human flourishing. It is essential to human flourishing: truth and love. These two things cannot be separated. Truth and love. If you have love but not truth, you're going to do some very crazy things. If you have truth but not love, you're going to do some very heartless things. These two things are incredibly important. It's also one of the reasons why the apostles in the Bible write so often about love. Peter, I believe it's Peter, but it may have been Paul. No, I think it was Peter. Peter writes, "And as always, love one another, for love covers a multitude of sins." What does he mean by that? If I genuinely love my enemy, and I mean genuinely love my enemy, there are going to be things that I simply cannot do to my enemy because I love my enemy, right? And I mean genuinely love my enemy. It's not some fake love trying to pretend like I love my enemy. I love my enemy to the point where I don't want to destroy him. I want to save him. I want to show him what he is doing wrong, where he is making mistakes, because I love him, right? If I genuinely love my friend, I'm not going to steal from him. I'm not going to hurt him. If I genuinely love fellow believers and fellow humans, I'm not going to, steal my best friend's girlfriend or something to that effect, because I genuinely love both her and him. Therefore, there's going to be certain sins that I may have that I just won't do because I genuinely love people. But truth is so important. You see, the leftists have thrown away truth in the name of love. They have thrown away mercy and justice in the name of empathy. Because you and I, who are conservative, will listen to that story of a homeless woman having her rotten feet amputated. And then instead of putting this woman in a institution or in a hospital where she can actually receive care, right? And they can fix her drug use, they release her back onto the street because it's compassionate. Don't judge the homeless. And it's like, wait, what the hell are you talking about? This isn't about judge. This is about someone is suffering. You can clearly see that this person is suffering. Now is not the time for empathy, especially not empty empathy. Now is the time to fix this person's life, even if they don't want it. Even if they tell you, but I want to continue using drugs and I want to continue drinking myself off to death. Yeah, we don't care because you are destroying yourself. You are harming yourself. So we are stepping in and saying enough of this. You're not going to do it. Not on our watch. If you genuinely want to harm yourself, you're going to have to do it behind our backs where we can't stop you. Right? That's the difference between it. We have sacrificed, the left specifically, have sacrificed truth in the name of love, which then renders that love completely and utterly useless.
Nowak bleed to death because they believed the lie told by the murderer's accomplice that Nowak was a racist and thus, by extension, the perpetrator. Los Angeles politicians defunded and mismanaged the fire department and failed to keep the crucial water reservoir full because they were focused like a laser on DEI, resulting in catastrophic and utterly avoidable fires. Trans surgeries on minors transgress historic protections of children like Foxvarian. Surgeons removed her breasts when she was 16 years old after trans-influenced communicators convinced her she was actually a boy.
Dude, there's a special place in hell for people who do this to children. There is a special place in hell for people who do this to children. Hello from the flight from Belgrade to Amsterdam. DNXall, how you doing, sir?
Climate activists raise energy prices, deindustrialize rich nations, and work to stop poor nations from building natural gas-fueled fertilizer factories. Our schools, universities, and legacy media add insult to injury.
Just in case you guys didn't know, what Europe is doing to South Africa specifically is absolutely criminal. South Africa desperately needs a manufacturing revolution. We need an industrial revolution. We need factories. We need mines. We need to explode. And what is Europe doing? Europe is consistently pumping billions upon billions of euros into South Africa with one caveat, one condition. Don't build nuclear power stations. Don't build coal power stations. Put up a few solar plants instead. Solar power and wind power does not power factories. It does not help with an industrial revolution. Quite the contrary, it will keep your country away from that industrial revolution for years to come. That's happening to us, to the poorer nations in South Africa and in Africa, not to mention the fertilizer problem and what these Western elites are doing to Africa in terms of its agriculture.
By programming our children to believe they're stained by slavery, colonialism, and genocide. And now governments around the world are seeking to deny them alternative sources of information that might contradict the establishment's degrading narrative while simultaneously imposing digital IDs on the rest of us.
Yeah, by the way, for those of you that don't know, I don't know if you guys saw it, but the South African government is starting their own satellite internet company. Did you guys see that? Yeah, starting their own satellite internet company. And guess what? the satellite internet company that they're starting isn't Starlink. It's not running on Starlink's backbone. It's some company from the UAE, and you know why they're doing it. They're doing it to regain control of the information. This is the same reason why they're working super, super hard to get what's it called again? I can't remember now. But it's a license for podcasters. So if you're a YouTuber in South Africa, you will need a license from the government in order to make YouTube videos. If you don't have the license, you can go kick rocks, right? This is just how it's going to be. It's all in the name of regaining control of the information. They don't want you and I to be able to discuss their evil and wicked schemes. This is the biggest threat that Starlink is to them. If you think about it, when did the government tell Elon Musk that Starlink wasn't allowed in South Africa? When was that? When did that happen the first time? I'll give you guys a clue. When Starlink allowed Ukraine to communicate with the rest of the world after Russia took down a lot of its internet. And then it really amped up after Starlink allowed Iranians to communicate with the rest of the world, to tell the rest of the world that the IRGC was busy slaughtering tens of thousands of Iranians who merely protested against a wicked and evil terrorist regime. Suddenly then, the South African government is all about how evil Elon Musk and Starlink is. That's all they want. They want to be able to turn off the internet. It wouldn't be that hard in South Africa. Pretty much all of the internet that you and I use every single day connects to the rest of the world through about 3 main undersea cables, and all of them meet, I believe, in Eastern Cape. I can't remember the town now, but it's a town in the Eastern Cape where all of those connections are made. You destroy that substation and there's no internet. You and I do not connect to the rest of the world. You don't have to destroy it, you just need to switch it off. If you switch that off, you and I cannot communicate with the rest of the world. We're effectively stuck just here in South Africa. And if you don't have Starlink, guess what? Now you have to go on the government satellite internet. And guess what? If the government doesn't like what you say, they can just switch off your internet. And then you're not saying much of anything. Matty, how you doing, sir? Great Rivers, how you doing?
Now, many people believe that these attacks on our civilization stem from ignorance, excessive empathy, or good intentions gone wrong. And indeed, the vast majority of people do not want to scrap the pillars of Western civilization. And many of them are motivated by compassion and concern for the most vulnerable members of our society.
I don't believe that.
But
I don't believe that, because many of them who are actually driven by compassion, they're just a little ignorant. Doesn't make sense when you see the results of their plans and you can see that the opposite is in fact happening. And yet all they will constantly do is find another reason why they should just do more of this. Take, for example, feminism. Feminism has received over the last 30 years ever more influence and power over the political decision-making of our world, to the point where almost all of our politics is driven in part by the feminist movement. In that same period of time, female suicides have gone up by a factor of almost 300%. 300% increase in female suicides. And what is the answer of the feminists? More feminism, please. No one stops. Now, I'm not saying that feminism is the direct result of women killing themselves, but I am saying if after 30 years you look at what's happening on the ground and saying, wow, there's a lot of women killing themselves, you might stop. If caring about women was actually the reason you were doing what you were doing, you might stop and say, wait, we should probably do a study to figure out if what we're doing at the moment isn't causing all of this unhappiness and death. If that's genuinely what you care about. Maybe it comes out that no, actually, feminism isn't the problem. It's something completely different. It's something in the water. It's turning the frogs gay and making women kill themselves. Maybe that is what it is, right? But you would stop and say, wait, I don't think I'm having the positive effect that I want to have on the world. The fact that that never triggers in these people tells me that it is not compassion that drives them.
Intellectual pioneers who framed these anti-civilizational policies as necessary for remedying entrenched and historical injustices do, in fact, want to destroy Western civilization as we know it and replace it with something they believe will be more just. They believe that inequality and suffering stem from our social organization in general and from capitalism, industrialization, meritocracy, equal justice, and gender roles in particular. They are knowingly and unknowingly heirs to Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who said society corrupted innocent children while abandoning all 5 of his to orphanages.
Yeah, FYI, Jean-Jacques Rousseau is one of the fathers of the modern communist postmodernist world. He's one of the most, I think Mike and Schellenberg is actually going to mention it here. He's one of the most quoted people in Western academia, even in South Africa. The vast majority of students are quoting Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And there's another one that they have that's also like a super, oh, why can't I remember his name? It's another French philosopher who, now it's going to drive me crazy. Oh, come on. Let me just quickly see here. I'm just looking quickly. Give me a second. I'll find his name. I can't remember his name now, but he's also one of the fathers of postmodernism. And he advocated for the legalization of pedophilia. Don't think it's Foucault who did that. Foucault just abandoned his children and then subsequently wrote a bunch of books about how parents should raise their children. Just FYI, this is a man that abandoned his own children and then told the world how one should raise one's children. And then the other father of it, actually the mother of feminism, also argued for the legalization of pedophilia, in case you didn't know that.
They believe they can, both through their policies and the transformation of language and thought, radically reorganize society in ways that dramatically reduce, if not eliminate, inequality and suffering. Their complaint is not that the system is malfunctioning, but rather that it's functioning normally. And a close reading of these anti-civilization intellectuals reveals that they are motivated not by empathy and love of humanity, but rather by its opposite, the creation, projection, and hatred of cartoon villains onto others. Rousseau was the first in a long line of reformers who claimed to love humanity, but who hate humans. They believe the defenders of civilization are as evil as the system they defend and demand that they be silenced and removed from universities, social media platforms, and polite society. They view law and order, national borders, and meritocracy as strategies for villains to oppress victims. And they view reality not as evidence against their radical project, but rather as evidence that their project has been insufficiently radical. Now, there are some economic reasons for this.
Doesn't that sound very familiar to you guys? After 32 years of ANC policy and ANC rule, seeing the destruction and the misery that it has caused, what does the ANC consistently claim needs to happen more? the same policies and the same ideas that has led to this suffering just needs to happen more. Just needs to happen more. It needs to be explained more. We need more of this expropriation without compensation. We need more transformation. We need more redress. We need more, because somehow, apparently, that will lead to, I don't know, at some point it'll change. This is exactly what he just said there.
Our societies are directed by a professional managerial class whose claim to authority stems from its alleged expertise. They have sought to continue to seek to control practically every aspect of human life, from the productive sectors of the economy to popular culture to language itself. They benefit from an expansion.
Guys, this is not a South African man speaking. This is a man from America, from California, America. And he may as well be speaking about the ANC, trying to control every facet of human life, even language, the Balabol, culture, Bokkiesvik. You mention it, they want control of all of it.
Expansion of the state and of parastatal entities like so-called NGOs. And they need to maintain the fantasy that Western civilization creates victims, and that if only they had more power, they could reorganize it in ways that would finally allow for universal freedom, prosperity, and sustainability. In other words, we are the first civilization wealthy enough to fund a tenured class whose full-time job is to explain why it should never have existed. But what most drives the anti-civilization discourse and movement are the unmet spiritual and psychological needs stemming from the declining influence of the Enlightenment and Christian faith and values that undergird Western civilization.
This is the part.
The remarkable progress of science, technology, and industry has weakened belief in a transcendent God and moral order, without which people lack a way to make sense of inequality and suffering. In the absence of a sacred authority, many in the West have come to blame civilization and structure.
I just want to highlight one thing here. It's not remarkable discoveries of science that have removed people's faith. It is that those people who made those remarkable studies had a bunch of science explainers that then tried to pass off these scientific discoveries as if they perfectly explain away the need for a God. Take, for example, the Big Bang Theory. If you listen to the science popularizers, they'll tell you that the Big Bang Theory explains perfectly why we no longer need God. We can now explain where the universe actually came from. The problem is when you look at the people who actually discovered the Big Bang Theory, they won't make a similar claim. They won't say that this somehow replaces God, because it doesn't. All it does is explain a mechanism through which the universe came to be. It does not explain an origin. In fact, most scientists will absolutely admit science isn't about explaining origin, it's about explaining mechanism. Origin is a fugazi. Because as soon as you get to the Big Bang and you say, well, see, we don't need a God, we have the Big Bang, the natural next question that must follow is, okay, where did the matter come from that ultimately led to the singularity point that ultimately led to the Big Bang? So all you've done is you've moved the question that is unanswerable one step further away. You have not answered that question. The same is true for those who believe that man comes from a single cellular organism. Okay, now you have the singular cell. You still have not explained how that cell came to be, nor have you explained how that cell was ever capable of replicating itself, right? So you've not explained the origin of anything. You've merely explained the processes thereof. And most scientists will absolutely admit this to you. So it's not a case of science has sort of evolved so fast and has discovered things so fast that humans finally no longer have a need for God. It is that there has been a tried and absolute brutal attack on faith itself, to the point where you had people like the Four Horsemen, Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens and Dan Bennett, who did everything in their power to convince people that there is no God whatsoever. These very same people, when actually pressed upon their beliefs, have to admit that it's not that they can disprove that there is a God, they just choose not to believe in God. But when you read their books, so for example, when Richard Dawkins is actually pressed upon the claims that he make as true in his books, he has to admit that most of those claims are, well, little more than his own beliefs. But when you read it in his books, he passes off those claims as if true. For example, in one of Richard Dawkins' books, he makes the claim that there is no historians on earth that believe that Jesus Christ actually existed. The truth, however, is that almost all historians on earth believe that Jesus Christ actually existed. There's a handful of historians out there who go, we don't think he existed. And most of them only, again, rely on the idea of we don't want to believe that he exists, therefore we won't. But he makes these claims in his books because he knows he can get away with it. There's been a targeted attack on religion, and it has twisted science and philosophy to the point where it suits the narrative. And now even people like Richard Dawkins is left to believe or to admit he hoped that an atheist world would actually lead to more love and kindness and all the good stuff that he wants to see in the world. But now he describes himself as a cultural Christian because he's realizing that once you kill God, some really bad things tend to happen in that society. I just wanted to mention that.
Structures of power for all inequality and suffering, and have placed their faith in an inversion of that order. Unfortunately, efforts to shore up the public's faith in Christian values and faith have mostly failed. While there are some signs of a recent uptick in religiosity, the long-term trajectory is away from it. Anti-civilization actors have taken advantage of rising disbelief in a higher power to successfully sell utopian dream worlds.
Mm-hmm. This is the part
because the vast majority of people in the West still favor civilization and its pillars, the architects of civilizational deconstruction have created elaborate dream worlds that misdescribe reality and misattribute to civilization the harms that their policies create.
Okay, this is the part that I really wanted to show you guys. This is the thing that we as conservatives and as normal people are suffering against. This is the thing that we are fighting. I told you guys in a video that I made last week or maybe the week before that, utopian thinkers versus anti-utopian thinkers. Michael Schellenberger, I think, watched my video. I don't think he did actually, but because the concept isn't new, this has been discussed. But you see, once you remove God, it becomes very easy for human beings to start thinking, but hold on, surely we can create heaven on earth. Because, okay, so put yourself in the mind of someone who no longer believes in God. This is it. This is all there is. And then you die, right? And once you die, there is nothing after this. So if this is all there is, we owe it to ourselves to make this the best possible place imaginable. And because you have no sense of who humanity actually is at its core, you believe in your heart of heart that you can manifest a dream-like world, a world that has no suffering, everyone is happy, everyone is perfect all the time, everyone is completely taken care of. Now, if you move that to a Christian worldview, why do Christians not share that view? Because at the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve commits this very sin. The snake doesn't come to Adam and Eve and promise them eternal life. He doesn't come to Adam and Eve and promise them riches and wealth beyond their wildest imaginations. The snake offers Adam and Eve godhood, the ability to be God. This is what the snake tells them. When he says to Eve, eat of the tree, Eve says to him, I cannot, because God told me I will surely die. And he says to her, surely you will not die. If you eat of this tree, you will be like God. So at the original sin, the sin in the garden, mankind becomes corrupt because mankind wants to play God. In other words, we believe we can do it better. So if you remove God from the mind of man, this means that man should be capable of building utopia. The Christian worldview, on the other hand, says man cannot build utopia because man is endlessly corrupt. No matter what man touches, he will eventually corrupt it. No matter how hard man tries, there is no system that he can build that will not ultimately become a tyranny upon itself. And so the Christian worldview says we need to limit power as much as possible because it will become corrupt. And once it becomes corrupt, the stronger that system is, the more tyrannical that system will become. This is why you look at a lot of the churches in the world, they all advocate for a complete separation of church and state. There's only two churches really in the world with a bunch of their offshoots that don't argue for it. The Roman Catholic Church does not argue for the separation of church and state. And then its offshoots, the NG Kerk, the Anglican Church, although I should say the English Anglican Church, and to some extent the Orthodox too, although the Orthodox, I think, is a little bit more suspicious of church and state involvement. But the only reason those churches do not argue against the separation of church and state is because historically those churches have used the state in order to push their own ideologies upon the world, right? So those churches believe in that sort of link. But the vast majority of churches out there are firm believers in the separation of church and state because of this corrupting model. The second the church gets too powerful, it'll become corrupt. The second the government becomes too powerful, it'll become corrupt. If you merge those two, power is eternal, effectively, and it'll become corrupt. So Christians can't believe in a utopian view because we know that utopia is impossible. So now if you're a leftist, if you're an ANC member, if you're Cyril Ramaphosa or Fikile Mbalula or any of the other true believing communists in this world, Peter Kriel, Kim Heller, Carl Niehaus, all of these guys, right? You have this image of utopia that you should be able to build, right? That you should be able to build. If that is your viewpoint, you can start to understand why someone like myself calling them out is a threat to society and a threat to humanity, because I'm standing between them and utopia, right? I'm standing between them and this beautiful world that they are going to create. If you go back to the Soviets killed about 40 million people during the course of the Soviet Union, of their own people, 40 million of their own people. Why did they kill those people? Because they were trying to create this utopia that just never actually gets going. You know, this utopia will just never. It's just always sort of running into problems, and there's always someone standing in the way of this utopia happening. And then that person needs to be killed. And you can understand this, right? If I told you, all you have to do is kill these two babies and there will be no more suffering on earth ever, the vast majority of people would go, okay, fine, we'll kill these two babies. It's bad to kill babies, but we're going to stop suffering on earth forever. If you're a leftist, You believe that all we have to do is kill Charlie Kirk. All we have to do is kill Donald Trump. All we have to do is try AfriForum and SAI and Solidarity for Treason and throw them in prison. All we have to do is shut down YouTube and shut down the people that consistently speak out against our movement. All we have to do is silence the critics, and then we'll have utopia. Then things will be beautiful. This is why Carl Niehaus believes that the government should take bulldozers and smash Urania to bits. Why the government should arrest every single one of the members and residents of Urania. Not that Urania has done anything illegal, but Urania is standing in the way of utopia. Because as long as Urania exists, it gives South Africans another thing to yearn for. And if South Africans are yearning for that thing, they're not going to go towards the utopia that Carl Niehaus and the other tyrants of this country wants to build for them. It creates an upset feeling. And now remember, if utopia is achievable, if you are a man or a person that believes that there is a utopia that can be created, right? If you believe that there is a utopia that can be created, it is imperative upon you that you also believe that mankind can be perfected. Because if you believe that you can create utopia without believing that mankind can be perfected, you will have a logical inconsistency in your beliefs. Now, if mankind can be perfected, it means that mankind can also be corrupted. This means that if you get rid of people criticizing, if you get rid of people saying the wrong thing, you'll stop mankind's corruption. Therefore, mankind will be perfected, and then you will have your utopia. If you view the world that way, if you view the world through that lens, everything that happens in South Africa from these far left communist nutcases that we have in government starts to make a lot of sense. Scriptures was gemanipuleerd om agendas te druk, maar daar is ware feite teen agendas. Mense het altyd probeer wegbeweeg van Catholic en Protestante cults, maar om actually te glo moet jy self okay, so Jurgen, let me quickly respond to this. So the scriptures have been corrupted. We have transcripts of all of the scripture going back to the first and the second century after Jesus Christ. We have full manuscripts of the Old Testament 250 years prior to Jesus Christ coming. This is in the Dead Sea Scrolls. When exactly was these things corrupted to change how people think? Because in your view, the view that you create in your mind, the danger there becomes that you can now pick and choose the things that you want to believe. The second you read something that you don't really like, you just go, oh, that was corrupted. I'm not going to believe that. I'll believe the things that work for me, the things that I like. Oh, Jesus said, stop sexual immorality. That's probably a corruption, right? That's probably, I can sleep with as many women as I like. It makes me really happy to do so. Or you can be like one of the deconstructionists. No, you don't understand. The parts about homosexuality, that was added in because of culture and all the rest of it. God loves homosexuality, actually. So therefore, I'm going to go be homosexual all the time. The problem with your ideology, my friend, is that if you view the parts of the Bible as corrupt and other parts of it not corrupt, then you end up believing none of it. Or you end up only believing the stuff that reinforces your worldview. Either way, you have no evidence that the Bible has been corrupted. You have no evidence that we don't have the original Bible. If you choose not to believe in the original Bible that we have, then you are false. And then I will go so far as saying that you do not know who Jesus Christ is, you do not know who God the Father is, and you do not know who the Holy Spirit is. End of discussion. Either you believe the Word of God as it is written, or you do not. Now, you and I can debate endlessly about interpretations of the word, of which there are many. And many people have various different interpretations of the Bible. Some of them wrong, some of them right. Just yesterday, I had about 2 hours of a discussion with one of my sisters from the church, whom I love dearly, about the age of the earth. I am not a young earth believer. I believe the earth is about 4.5 billion years old and the universe is about 14.5 billion years old. And the way that I interpret Genesis, it's perfectly consistent with it. And that's perfectly fine. She doesn't view the earth as that old, and she believes that the earth is 6,000 years old. And we had a lively debate about the interpretation of Genesis. Neither of us deny that Genesis was written by Moses, most likely, and that Genesis is the first book of the Bible, and that it is the Word of God. We do not deny that. We simply argue and debate over our interpretations of Genesis 1. You and I can talk about that all day long. But if you're going to start picking and choosing which parts of the Bible is actually true, I will suggest to you that you are on a very dangerous path, because now you can ultimately reject whatever it is that doesn't quite sit right with you. You're giving them too much credit, Stephen. They don't believe in anything, Stephen. They don't care about utopia. They only care about money and power. So, David, it is true that some of the communists, like I would go so far as saying someone like Karl Niaus, for example, is not really driven by utopia. Karl Niaus couldn't care less. Karl Niaus is driven by his own interest in his own bank account. That's the only thing he cares about. So I will be honest and say there are most likely a lot of communists out there who only use this to their own advantage. And it right now appears to be an ideology that really corrupts young people quite quickly. And so they love it. But I would argue someone like, for example, Peter Kriel. I think Peter Kriel is a true believer. I think Peter Kriel genuinely believes that if the ANC could just finally redistribute all of the land, if the ANC could just finally give all of the white jobs to the black people, if the ANC could finally transfer all of the white wealth into the hands of black people, then South Africa will be great. And black people will be great. And even white people will be happy because they'll be the same as everyone else. I believe he genuinely believes that, right? And because he believes in utopia, he believes that it's possible to achieve that. Different interpretations, not cherry pickings. No, you cannot be a Christian and then start debating over what parts of the Bible you actually want to believe in. Because as a Christian, and look, I've had these doubts before, right? Every Christian has, where you read the Bible and you go, how do I know that this is what was actually written, right? How do I know that this wasn't tampered with? And then I remind myself of one fundamental fact. I serve the creator of the universe. If he did not want every single book in that Bible to survive, he wouldn't have let it. The fact that I have this Bible right now in the exact image that it is in suggests that this is exactly what he wanted me to have. And therefore, I'm happy to believe every single word that is written in it. Because if he didn't want me to, it wouldn't have been there. Simple as that. Young Earth Believer year, day 3, plants, and day 4, sun. Plants can't live without live long without sun. Tokoloshi, I'm not gonna, like I said, I have brothers and sisters in my church who are young Earth believers whom I love dearly. Dearly, right? I have no problem with people wanting to believe in the young Earth or the old Earth. It's all fine by me. I personally think that the young Earth believers have a number of problems that isn't really dealt with, and there's a number of things that suddenly have to be adapted. So, for example, you have Genesis 1 where God creates the universe. Then you have Genesis 2 that says that there were no plants on the earth because man was not yet there to toil the ground. And then suddenly, the young earthers who, up until now, is determined to use a physical, literal reading of the word, suddenly now goes, oh, but no, clearly he's talking about the Garden of Eden there. And it's like, oh, well, he's not clearly talking about the Garden of Eden there. He's saying there are no plants on the earth because man is not yet there to toil the ground. Or to till the ground, I think it says. Right? So the problem is you're making mistakes. You have to interview me to put a lot of this to bed. Chris, I'm not sure. I mean, I did tell you that we will eventually have an interview, but I'm not sure what you would put to bed. You're going to have your opinions. No one is going to believe you or agree with you. This is the nature of the internet, right? If you could put something to bed, life would be brilliant. You're going to share your story, and that's going to be great, but it's not going to change those who don't want to believe's minds on anything. As a conservative, I have empathy, but not suicidal empathy. Big difference. Truth. Very, very true. Sadly, the Bible has been changed over time. Turks Fay, so we have the earliest transcripts of the Bible dating back to the 1st and 2nd century. Most of the modern translations that we have are translated from the original manuscripts. So what changes where? Have there been Bibles that changed a lot of things? Yes, absolutely. Most of those Bibles have been condemned. So, for example, the Passion translation that came out a few years ago, that's been massively condemned by just about every Christian church out there, who's gone, no, 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 sir, you're making serious, serious mistakes here because you're translating from the wrong passages. The Bible has not been changed. There's no evidence that the Bible has been changed. In fact, the only way that you could even make the argument, Wes Huff actually makes this point, and he's an expert in this. He says the only changes that's been made to the Bible is that they've written too much. Because in a lot of Bibles that you will get today, the ESV, the American Standard, even the Afrikaans Bible, they'll write all of the differences in, right? So if one manuscript has it this way and another manuscript has it slightly different, they'll write both in there. Because they'd rather make sure that everything is in there than leave something out that might be important. Right? So you definitely don't have things that just fall away or that's wildly changed and now we don't really know what the original was. We know what the original was. It's not changed. It's transcribed. That dude absolutely true. Stefan, it's a book that is written by 66 different authors over a span of many, many years, all confessing the same truth. That dude, it's not 66 different authors. I think it's 42 authors. It's 66 books, right? But a lot of those books are written by the same author. So I think it's 42 authors, 41 or 42 authors, 66 books over the course across 3 continents over the course of 1,500 years. That's just for the it is 1,500 years. So the Bible is written over the course of 1,600 years by 42 authors, 66 books, all telling a single through line story. So yeah, you are correct by that. Matthew 17:21 was removed. It's not so much that's been removed. Wes Huff actually had a video on this. I'm trying to remember, but there's an actual explanation for why they just don't have 21, verse 21 in the Bible. I'm trying to remember now, but Wes Huff actually explained it because the earliest church fathers spoke about it. I'm trying to think. I think actually it was a numbering issue. Someone made a mistake in the number because remember the earliest verses or the earliest versions of the Bible weren't versed, right? They weren't versed. The early authors were just writing letters. They were just writing down. We added the verses and the chapters so that it becomes easier to do Bible study. But if you go back to the earliest, it's not like Mark was sitting there going, chapter 1, verse 1, writing the verses, right? We added the verses in. And if I remember correctly, now I'm speaking under correction here because I this was a while ago that I listened to this, but it was a numbering issue. So the people who wrote the numbers down just completely missed 21. And by the time they realized their mistake, that they skipped 21, it was already too late, because at that point everyone already understood the verse numbers in the way that they understood it. So to now change the order would just mean that everyone had to restart from scratch. And remember, at this point, the entire Bible is written by hand. So you have to effectively put out thousands of new copies of the Bible, right, by hand. So it became sort of just easier to just keep going with this, and just have, if I remember correctly, there is a verse in the Bible that is explained by this. I just can't remember if it is actually Matthew 21. But there is a verse in the Bible where it's not a verse that's missing, it's the numbers that was wrong. They just completely missed the numbers. Alterations to the footnotes to erase how important resisting tyranny, oppression, and slavery is for Christians in Christ. Yeah, and the subsequent Bibles re-included that, right? So yes, there are versions of the Bible that change small things here and there, but more often than not, those are translation errors, right? Because we're dealing with languages here that are mostly dead, right? No one speaks Aramaic anymore. No one speaks ancient Greek anymore. It really means that some of the words we have a loose idea of what that word could have been referring to, but we don't always know exactly what that word would have been referring to. And so there's room for interpretation and for translation in that. And that's how you get different Bibles saying different things. It's the same concept. They're just using different words because the word could mean 4 or 5 different things, dependent on the context, because that's also a thing with ancient languages. You would oftentimes have one word that can mean like 5 or 6 different things, dependent on the context within which you're using it. Modern day languages have that too, although we have far more languages, or far more words nowadays. True, canons and verses are often interlinked. You will not find in the religion. You will not find it in the religion section, but you will probably find proof of Jesus in the historical section. Maddie, I would say, so if you're looking for proof, I would say there is nothing that any human being on this earth believe with proof. So, David, for example, I could ask you, are you married or do you have a girlfriend, David? There are true instances of intentional malicious corruption, though. I wouldn't say. Again, are we talking about the Bible universal, or are we talking about individual translations of the Bible? Because there I would agree with you. Things like the Passion interpretation, for example, translation, is a maliciously bad translation of the Bible. So there I would agree with you. But if you mean the Bible universal, as in the ESV, for example, there what you get is their best understanding of what these ancient texts said in the language English, at least for the ESV, English standard version. Okay, David, you're single. Okay, if you were okay, so being single, I could ask you. I'm trying to think now. Do you love your mom? And you might answer yes. And then I go, prove it. How do you prove that you love someone? How do you prove that someone loves you? Or I could ask you, does your mom and dad love you? And you could say yes. And I go, prove it. Provide proof that they love you. You can't prove it. How the hell are you supposed to prove that? You don't do things based on proof. You do things based on evidence. Right? Proof is something that usually comes after the fact. It's something that happens afterwards. So, for example, when you walk to your shower in the morning and you turn it on, you have no proof that the water is hot. When you turn on that shower, the water could either be hot or cold. You have no proof of anything. You have faith that the water is hot because you turned on the geyser, but the geyser could have broken. You don't know. Yet you turn on the water as if the geyser is working because you have faith that your geyser might be working or should be working. And then you get the proof after you've turned on the shower, right? Now you get the proof. Water comes out and you go, oh, it's hot. That's now proof that it is hot. But now we could go further and say, well, is it actually hot? Is it really hot? Or maybe you have a condition that makes you think it's hot when it really isn't hot. So is that proof? So we could even go deeper and start questioning even more. The point is that nothing you believe on this earth has proof for anything. There's evidence for things. Right? So how do you know your mom loves you? Well, she took care of me and she raised me. And when I'm sick, she brings me soup. And when we speak on the phone, she tells me she loves me. This isn't proof. It is evidence of a mother loving her son, but it's not proof of it. In order to prove it, we would need to hack her brain somehow and then really test, if we could, is this really love or is this actually something else? Because you do get mothers who do all of those same things, but it's a manipulation tactic to get their kids to do something that they want them to do. So it really has nothing to do with proof, right? Or love. It's just completely self-indulgent. There's evidence for Jesus existing. And the evidence is overwhelming, by the way. And this is genuinely true. The vast majority of historians, at least mainstream historians, all believe that Jesus existed. The vast majority of historians believe that Jesus died on the cross. There's more than enough evidence for it. The only question that historians have, at least the secular ones, the only question mark is, did he rise on the third day? This they don't know. And what's really beautiful is that the overwhelming majority of biblical scholarly historians, so these are historians that specifically study the Bible, even the secular ones, so not the ones who believe, the ones who do not believe, they all say the same thing. Jesus absolutely existed. Jesus absolutely died on the cross. And something absolutely happened on that Sunday. They don't know what. They're not prepared to say that there was a miracle and Jesus rose from the dead, but something happened there because there's a number of evidences that we see after the fact that suggests something must have happened on that Sunday. So let's take the first. We suddenly see, and this is extra biblical, we go to Josephus and we find that thousands of Jews in Jerusalem suddenly change the Sabbath from a Saturday to a Sunday. This is strange. Remember, if you're a Jew and if you're a Torah-believing Jew, the Sabbath is meant to be on a Saturday. It's the last day of the week. It's the seventh day, the day that God rested. It's built into it. Why would you suddenly celebrate the Sabbath on a Sunday? This makes no sense. And yet, they see within a year of Jesus dying, and this is Josephus writing. He's not part of the Bible. He is a Jew himself writing for the Romans. He has no interest in Christianity whatsoever. In fact, as a Jew, he seems very disinterested in even Jewish traditions. He's a historian, and that's really all he cares about. But he writes about thousands of Jews who suddenly start celebrating the Sabbath on the Sunday rather than on the Saturday. This suggests something must have happened that moved their Sabbath to a Sunday. Then we look at the apostles. The apostles have every reason to stop talking about Jesus. Every reason. And yet they don't. They claim Jesus rose from the dead, and many of them claim it right up until their own deaths, which, again, for historians is pretty weird, because people will die for a lie if they don't know the lie is a lie. Right? So you can get people in a cult and you can convince them of things, and then they'll die because they believe in this thing. But you won't really get someone to die for a lie that they know is a lie. Right? The apostles are given the choice. Just say that Jesus didn't rise from the dead and we won't kill you. And yet they go, no, well, you'd have to kill me then. If they knew that that was a lie, why would they kill themselves? Why would they allow themselves to be killed for something that they know is a lie? And so that's a big thing as well. You read a lot of the epistles and a lot of the writings of the apostles, and they write them as with bibliographies in place, with references in place. So they'll say, Jesus was with this guy, Matthew, and so on and so on, from that town. I can't remember the name now, but there's a few instances of the apostles saying, if you don't believe me, go ask him and him from that town. He was there. You can go ask him. He was there, which was an ancient way of providing citation, right? Giving references. If you don't believe me, go ask that guy. He was there. He saw it all happen. So there's a major consistency problem for the secular historians. The story remains consistent. If they look at other Messiah figures around Jesus Christ, the stories die with them. Their movements die with them. So you have a number of other Messiah figures around Jesus Christ. This is actually one of the reasons why Jesus calls himself the Son of Man rather than the Son of God. Because at the time, the Son of God was pretty much all of the Roman emperors, but then also a lot of these Messiah figures that were coming along were calling themselves the Son of God. So Jesus comes and he calls himself the Son of Man instead, which is still biblically consistent because Jeremiah, Isaiah prophesy about the Son of Man. David prophesies about the Son of Man that is coming. Who is man that you should care about him? Who is the Son of Man that you should exalt him? So there's prophecies about the Son of Man, which Jesus then ascribes to himself. But all of these movements of all of these Messiah figures, as soon as the Messiah figure dies, the movement dies alongside him. All of the apostles and disciples sort of just disappear. Jesus's doesn't. In fact, Jesus's takes off and it changes the world. So there's a number of evidences that historians use to say that they know Jesus lived, they know Jesus died, and something happened on that Sunday, because there's some weird stuff that follows that Sunday that means that something must have happened there. So either someone was able to convince all of these apostles that Jesus absolutely rose from the dead, and they did such a good job of it that these guys were willing to die for that, or Jesus definitely rose from the dead. But something must have happened on that Sunday. The change is due to Constantine and church doctrine, nothing in scripture. Marian, how are you doing? I don't know exactly what you guys are talking about. It isn't the dying that convinces me. Some people will choke on their greed. It's the lack of sex, money, and personal power. Making a good point, thanks. I just read the book as a spiritual book, The History of No Impact on My Life Today. The history is incredibly important because in the history, God reveals himself. If you if you're a Christian and all you do is read the New Testament, you fail to understand um, why Jesus had to come and why Jesus had to die for us. The Old Testament explains that part. The Old Testament really is a preamble to the gospel. I've been reading through the Old Testament now, and it is fascinating to see God at work, to see the way God functions. It's fascinating. What does the Bible say about bringing in a tree into your house and decorating it? There's nothing, but people are just enjoying themselves. There's no reason why aren't they allowed to do it, right? Like this isn't unless you're talking about some obscure rule in the Old Testament, which almost certainly the Old Testament had a bunch of rules, right? And it's important to understand that there are different laws in the Old Testament. Some of them, at least most of them, were meant for the Israelites, for Israel. Those are not for Christians whatsoever. It has nothing to do with Christians. It has nothing to do with the Gentiles. For example, when the Bible in the Old Testament says that they should be circumcised, we know for a fact that Paul and Peter makes the determination that circumcision isn't necessary because the purpose of the law wasn't to save. The purpose of the law was to tell man how impossible it is to save himself. That was the purpose of the law. The law never saved anyone. Love your insight and your passion for Jesus. Um, Marion, are you a Seventh-day Adventist or a Jehovah's Witness? It could be one of the two. Because the Seventh-day Adventists and the Jehovah's Witnesses have strange things about using the correct words in order to speak about God. There is now no Jew nor Gentile, nor slave nor free, nor male nor female. Yeah, Christine, that particular passage has also been quite corrupted in the process. I don't know. I love having conversations about the Bible. I'm not a Bible scholar, just FYI. I'm not a biblical scholar. I just enjoy having conversations about the Bible because I'm very passionate, as I'm sure many of you have seen already, about my faith. Because I genuinely believe South Africa needs more God. I don't believe that we'll save South Africa just politically. In fact, I believe South Africa got into the trouble that it's in because of politics. I agree. South Africa needs Jesus. Aran, amen. Not just South Africa, the world needs Jesus. It is incumbent. It is absolutely incumbent upon every Christian to go out there and preach the gospel, because without it, this country is lost. There is no way that you save a nation without bringing back Christ. It will not happen because the evil of our own hearts will always corrupt everything. There is a reason why every single civilization that has ever existed, existed with faith. Every single one of them. You have never had a single civilization built on atheism. This has never happened. Every civilization. The difference, of course, is that when you go to pagan civilizations, they're very bad civilizations to live in. They tend to be very cruel, very wicked, lots of human sacrifices, and all sorts of debaucheries. Christianity is the only religion on earth that produces civilizations that people actually want to live in. And now there's a lot of people that's going to go, oh, but what about Japan and South Korea? Those nations are so Christianized because of Western influence that they're effectively Asian Western nations. You didn't want to live in Japan prior to World War II. You definitely didn't want to live in South Korea prior to World War II. These were very harsh nations that really had very little respect for the individual. I made it a mission a month ago to read at least one chapter of the Bible a day before bed. I am on Leviticus 19 tonight, NIV version, and the books included by the Catholics and Orthodox. Andreas, so I would say, right, we have good reason not to include the Apocrypha. There's nothing wrong with the Apocrypha, but the evidence for the Apocrypha is incredibly weak. Like it's very weak. The evidence for the Apocrypha actually being part of original scriptures. But I don't think it's wrong to read the Apocrypha. I would argue the Apocrypha is very good to figure out culture, how the culture operated at the time, but not so good as inspired scripture. In fact, most of the Apocrypha, even the Jews of the day, rejected it. They did not believe that it was actual like actually inspired, like Maccabees 1, 2, and 3, and all the rest of it. I just wanted to read it and see it for myself and be ignorant about. No, you're perfectly welcome to do that. Right? I will stop no one from reading the Bible, provided you're reading the Bible. I'm happy. As long as you like, I would say if you find yourself struggling to read or to believe in God, if this is something that you genuinely want to do, but you just can't, my suggestion to you would be read your New Testament. Go to the New Testament. Start with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And before you read, just ask God to reveal himself to you. That's all you do. And read it genuinely. Don't read it trying to find reasons not to believe, because that's also intellectually dishonest. You have to be intellectually honest, which means you read with curiosity. You say, okay, I'm going to keep an open mind. I'm going to read this, and I'm going to allow the text to speak to me. And then just read it from Matthew all the way to Revelations. And if nothing happens, hey, at least you gave it a fair shot. From personal experience, I will say that something big happens and suddenly you realize, okay, things have changed now. All right, so Turks Fay, Jeremiah 10, 3-5 warns against the worshipping of idols. Right? That's physically what the verse is all about. It's about not worshipping idols. So what you say here, for the customs of the people are vain, for one cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workman with the axe, they deck it with silver, and with gold they fasten it. So you have to understand what is happening at this point, right? So the earliest idols, and these are idols that the nations around Israel, or at this point Judah, because Jeremiah is already, Israel and Judah have already split. The nations around Judah is taking little images of all sorts of animals and creatures, adorning it with gold and silver, and then calling it a god. And then they're worshiping to these gods, and they're praying to these idols, and they're sacrificing to these idols. That's specifically about idol worship. And Jeremiah is making the point these are wooden things, they're dead. That's why he says they're the work of the hands of the workman. Right? Without the workman cutting down the tree and making the little thing, this thing wouldn't exist. It can't even bring itself into existence. And yet, people are worshiping at it. They're worshiping to it. Right? So Jeremiah is making a joke. He's ridiculing these things, because without this man creating it with his own hands, this thing wouldn't even exist. It's not the same as a Christmas tree. Right? No Christian is putting up a Christmas tree in their living room and worshiping to it. They're putting up a Christmas tree for fun, to put the presents around so that their kids can enjoy it, to create a homey feel. And if you're a good Christian parent, you're teaching your children what Christmas is all about. What are we actually celebrating there? But it's not worship. Like, you could worship something without the tree. You could worship women. In fact, Peter makes this very point. Anything that takes over your mind and body is an idol to you. So if you're addicted to porn, that is your God. Doesn't need a physical little image. You don't need a tree in your living room. The fact that you can't escape pornography means that pornography is your God. If you lust after every single woman you see, congratulations, there's your goddess. And you worship and idolize that goddess. And God says, thou shalt have no other gods before me. That's what God is referring to. Get rid of the idols that keep you enslaved to them, that hold their power over you. It's not the same as a tree. Right? People are putting up a tree, a Christmas tree. I don't put up Christmas trees because I find it tedious, but I have no problem with people putting up a Christmas tree because they're not worshiping to the Christmas tree. Right? The Christmas tree is at best a symbol of Christmas. And yes, for a lot of Christians, they will actually use the Christmas tree as a symbol of the cross, because there are translations that say, and he was hung on the tree, because it was made of wood. And it's not even translations. Physically, I think it's Paul that says Jesus hung on the tree for your sins and your salvation. Right? What he's referring to is the tree is made of wood, the cross is made of wood, therefore it's tree wood, right? So people will say this is a stand-in for it, but that doesn't mean people are worshiping this tree, right? The tree is merely a symbol of something else. They're still not worshiping it, they're worshiping Jesus. The tree is just a symbol for it. It's like people who wear little crosses around their necks. They're not worshiping the cross. The cross is merely a reminder of Christ. I don't personally agree with having a cross around your neck. I don't have a moral issue with it. I just wouldn't have a cross around my own neck. But if someone wants to have that, they're fine. They can have that. But if you're going to start worshiping the cross around your neck, that's a different story. Now it's becoming an idol, right? If you start believing that cross around your neck has some kind of special power, problem, right? Because that cross around your neck is completely dead. The one who hung on that cross 2,000 years ago, alive and well and powerful. But the cross on your neck is not going to do anything. Well, some people go crazy in December, and December isn't really the birth of Christ Day. So Turksvay, this again, my dad has similar problems. He won't celebrate Christmas because that isn't really the birth of Christ. The fact is, we don't really know when the birth of Christ was, right? We make certain certain estimates and guesses, and we come to either March or maybe closer to October, depends on who you speak to. You know, everyone has sort of their own version of what that would have looked like. Um, I think it's by design that we're never actually told when Jesus is born. We're told when Jesus is crucified. That is firmly communicated. But we're never told when Jesus is born, because the day that Jesus was born isn't as important as the day that Jesus is crucified. It doesn't mean that people, Christians around the world, can't celebrate it as a cultural reminder of the day that our Savior was born. And then it doesn't matter what day Jesus was born, right? Because, well, we're only celebrating Jesus. And I think it's good for society to celebrate Jesus. He is, after all, our Savior. So I think in this regard, it's more one of those cultural practices that I think people should enjoy. You know, and I think if we're gonna have one day a year where everyone participates in the celebration of Jesus, why not? That's a good thing in my book, right? Um, because it gives us an opportunity to share the gospel. And that, by the way, is also why Christmas was ultimately instituted, was as a way to tell the pagans about Jesus, which I think is fine. I think we should have that, you know. We shouldn't be afraid to sometimes enjoy stuff, even if they're not, you know, all that biblical, you know. It's not, we should be careful not to turn things into heresies when they are not. And I think oftentimes a lot of Christians make the mistake of turning things that are mostly benign, just sort of fun stuff that people do, into heresies when they're not. You know, they're just disagreements, or they're just different interpretations of something that really doesn't matter. A good example of this would be, are you a young earth believer or an old earth believer? Right? You get people who believe in the old earth, you get people who believe in the young earth, but neither of those two versions is a heresy. You're not committing heresy if you believe in an old earth or a young earth. But I know Christians who believe that I am a heretic for not believing in a young earth, who claim that straight up. You're a heretic. Believing that the earth is 6,000 years old suddenly now has become a salvation issue, when it isn't a salvation issue, right? The only reference we have about Jesus' birth can be that the shepherds were in the field at a certain time of the year. Full and bloom, yes, the shepherds were in the fields, and we know that they saw a specific star, right? So we can sort of trace back using star charts. We can trace back to the exact date that a very bright star would have been over Bethlehem. Right. And so based on that, they can get a reasonable idea of what day it may have been. And even there, it doesn't come out on 25th of December. So there are other ways in which they can try and, jot down the exact birth of Jesus. But I again don't think, I think the circumstances of Jesus's birth is far more important than the date of Jesus's birth. So therefore, I do think it's important to celebrate the birth of Jesus, because if you think about what the birth of Jesus represents, the King of the universe, the Creator, from the beginning, he is there when God creates the earth and the heavens. He is there. He is present. In fact, the Bible tells us that through him all things are created, and by him all things are sustained. He is the God of glory. And he comes down to earth as a carpenter's son, too poor to even afford an inn. He sleeps with the animals. This is a king. Literally the king. And he sleeps in a crib made for animals. He came down as king to become the lowest of the lowly. In fact, one of the Gospels tells us that Jesus was nothing special to look at. He wasn't overly beautiful. He wasn't super tall and slender and well built. He was a normal dude. Absolutely painfully normal, and yet more than anyone could ever imagine. And I think the birth of Jesus, the circumstances of his birth is important because it allows us to see how our creator did not stand apathetically by and simply watch us suffer. Our creator became part of our suffering, and then he overcame it. I think that's an important part of it. To be careful not to become religious, ask Holy Spirit. He is our teacher. Truth. It's good to disagree. I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree with you. We should be welcomed to disagree with one another, and then debate the issues, provided that we can all stay respectful. I think it's easier for some Christians to argue and squabble with other Christians than with atheists and other faiths because the pushback isn't so intense from Christians. I don't think it's just that, although I do think that's a big part of it. But it's also the fact that there's so many faiths and so many interpretations of different faiths. And especially if you start arguing with, say, for example, Muslims, you really have to know the Quran in order to be able to debate the Quran, right? You can't just have knowledge of the Bible because they will catch you. For example, if you go and you speak to Jehovah's Witnesses, they will twist the Bible to the point where you will struggle to debate them. You will struggle to make your point because they have certain phrases and certain verses within the Bible that, if taken out of context, they will confuse you to no end. You have to know these things, right? And most Christians don't really care about it. They don't really want to care about it. And maybe that's wrong. We should always be prepared to offer a defense for the hope that is within us. That's absolutely true. But I think a lot of Christians just sort of go, look, I have my faith. I have my Lord. I read my Bible. I love Jesus. I don't care. I'll share the gospel with them, and if they don't agree, I'll just move on. I don't know what the right answer is, actually. Stephen, are you aware of Weishaupt? I love Weishaupt. May I send you a video he did about the birth of Jesus via Discord to watch later? Of course, Andrea. Of course. Is it Andrea or Andreas? But Andreas, you're more than welcome to send whatever. I love Weishaupt. I watch a lot of his content. So yeah, absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, we're already over 2 hours on a stream that I wasn't even planning on doing today. So I do appreciate all of you for coming out, for hanging out with me, for spending time with me. I'll be back tomorrow. So we're going to be doing a live stream tomorrow as well. Same time, same place. We're going to be talking about South Africa and the doomed experiment that is South Africa. So come check back for that. Well, excuse me. I hope you guys are going to enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your week. I appreciate all of you for coming out, for hanging out, and for spending your time with me. As always, ladies and gentlemen, I will see all of you in the next one. Be good to each other. be kind to each other. Peace.